My affair helped me feel alive again after feeling dead inside for so many years. Let's read Kathleen's story. And this story came through our website, which also came with permission to share because I don't like to share people's things that they didn't give me permission to share. All right, you ready, Luke?
Let's go.
When I was 25, I ran into a guy. Let's call him Martin. In the supermarket, who used to coach for the travel soccer club I played for growing up. He was about 12 years older than me, and I was instantly attracted to him. I remembered him from when I was younger. He never coached me directly, but he coached another girls' team in the age group a year below me. We exchanged a few flirty comments. I told him I recognized him from soccer. He told me he liked my rain boots. That was it. This was before social media was big. So when I got home, I went to Craigslist and wrote a blurb on missed connections, thinking there was no way he would ever see it. Literally, a few hours later, he responded. What ensued was 4 months of the highest highs and lowest lows I had ever experienced. He awakened me sexually, and I experienced bliss I had never known to be possible. At the same time, he constantly let me down. He was and still is incredibly complicated. He was newly divorced. His wife had cheated on him when their little boy was about 1, and she left him to be with this other person. In addition, he had battled cancer several times and had a very difficult upbringing. His mom raised him. His dad was an alcoholic and largely absent. Despite all of this, he was so hardworking, constantly trying to better himself professionally, etc. I so badly wanted more, but he couldn't do it. He had intense trust issues and a whole bunch of trauma that I had little to no understanding of. We were in different places in life. I ended things even though I didn't want to. I left to go on a trip to get away that summer and met my now husband. When I came back from the trip and was about to start my last semester of grad school, Martin told me he was in therapy and he wanted to try to work things out, and I wouldn't consider it. I left a few months later to start a new life with my now husband in another state. Martin and I stayed in touch for birthdays, and I would contribute to fundraisers he was supporting for cancer. But over time, these exchanges faded. When COVID started, Martin reached out on social media. He told me he hoped my family and I were staying safe. I told him the same. Then he told me he thought of me often and that I was the one that got away. I remember being really shocked by this statement and feeling emotional about it. But I didn't reciprocate. I just told him I appreciated what he said and that I recognized I was really immature and couldn't understand where he was at that time in his life. I also asked if he ever got remarried or if he was in a relationship, and he said no. And I pressed further and asked if he wished he would have been able to have more kids. I don't remember what his response was. This was in 2020. In 2023, I turned 40 and something snapped in me. I felt restless. I felt really unsettled by the lack of passion in my marriage, which had been missing for honestly 10 years. I was in the thick of raising 3 young boys. In August of that year, I was back home where I grew up, and I made the decision to reach out to Martin. He didn't respond to my text in a timely fashion and didn't seem interested. I asked if I could come see him one night, and he didn't respond. On my last day there, I left him a voice memo and told him that I have never forgotten him, and I think of him often. I also told him I wished him the best and that he should be proud of how he has raised his son, who was soon off to college. I left and went home to my family. When I opened my laptop, a barrage of text messages came up that I hadn't gotten on my cell phone for some reason. He had wanted to see me after all. I texted him and we began to reconnect in an intense way. About a week after we reconnected, he told me he had a growth and that he may have cancer again. Oh, this one's touchy. He had surgery scheduled to remove it that next month. 2 weeks later, I flew back home to see him, and I fell for him all over again. About 2 weeks after he had the surgery and cancer he started treatment, and at this writing, he just completed his second round of oral chemo. It is now a year later. I love him. I am still married, but don't want to be. I live halfway across the country from him. I have 3 boys, and I will not uproot them so I could pursue something with him. The issues he had with trust and attachment still remain and make this so hard. I literally cannot seem to untangle myself from him, and it drives me insane. I don't know what to do or where to go from here, but I know I love him and that it makes no logical sense. I know he loves me. I also love 3 little boys and I love their father, but I am not in love with him. He is kind and not abusive, an amazing dad. Love is hard. What I understand of my affair up until this point is my affair helped me feel alive again after feeling dead inside for so many years. Thoughts?
The cost of living in 2 different worlds. I mean, this is something that always comes up for me. You think about these scenarios where there's this kind of everything's perfect on paper on one side, but not fulfilling, not the same sense of meaning, not the connection that maybe is hoped for, desired. And then there's the dream, the desire, the passion, the something that's deeper. It's that sort of dichotomy of heart and head, this internal conflict. And it's like, in many ways, it's because we're trying to live 2 different lives simultaneously.
I know. I always think about, there's one thing that does make me feel guilty, and it's that my affair partner and I chose to leave the life of obligation or ought to in favor of something that was unknown. And I have a lot of sincere care for the people where that can't actually happen. Like, to think that my scenario should be somebody else's, I think is short-sighted. And whenever I read her story, it's like the connection that transcends time in a way where you can reignite that connection just by being present is so astounding to me.
Yeah.
Because even I thought, what would I do if I was in a room with my ex-husband and I'm like, I'm fucking repulsed. I don't want to be in that room type thing. And then whenever I think about some of these people who have found connection by way of something that is unconventional, not satisfactory to society standards, and they actually don't get the opportunity to see that connection through, I have a lot of empathy for them. Because I'm like, damn, to even be, I don't know, just not getting to see your dreams come true because you have so many other dependencies, I can understand that. And I feel guilty that I didn't endure that.
You feel you still carry that guilt, or that you...
I feel guilty when I hear other people's stories about...
Sort of an empathetic guilt.
Yeah, like this, oh my God, like I got something that they wanted.
Super.
It's heavy. And also, heavy. What?
I was going to say, yes, it is heavy.
It's almost survivor's guilt or something.
And so common. You've got this sort of, there's the 2 lives. There's also the 2 different types of love that are existing. There's that question in the community recently about the capacity, the ability to love more than one person, and what that really looks like for people. And the simple answer is yes, you can love more than one person. And but in terms of like the details and the nuance of that love, can 2 loves be exactly the same? And although I'm not sure I have the definitive answer for that question, my intuitive, my gut feeling as a guy says that no, they all have different qualities. Just like every relationship has a different quality, every friendship has a different quality to it. It's got different elements to it. Mm-hmm. And it does sometimes make me question as a person, is it possible to romantically love, to be in love with 2 people at the same time? Like, is this something that's genuinely achievable, or are they fitting 2 very different molds?
I don't know. I think the experience of falling in love it's a temporary one for sure. the aspect of falling into love with somebody. Remaining in love with somebody, though, I think requires devoted attention. And when you're trying to force your attention to go to somebody that it doesn't naturally go to, I think you're just playing a part. You're not actually cultivating the love that intrinsically exists. You're just becoming functional and transactional in the relationship rather than experiencing the relationship.
Do you think you're a victim to love, or do you think you choose love?
I think love chooses you.
Okay.
Even coming off the heels of that call that you and I were just on, and how JD had said, I think that love meets you where you are type thing is very true. And I know that we mostly talk about romantic relationships and figuring out who the primary partner is, but I don't think it's that. I think that we exist with many relationships inside of our own timeline, and it changes and it evolves, and whether we're actually present in our life determines whether we are the victim in it. So it's not, do you choose to, is love a choice, or are you a victim of love? I don't think it's an either or. I think that love chooses you, and it shows up in your life in a myriad of ways, like even through this business, meeting people and them saying, this is such a godsend. And I do think that we actively, at least what we're demonstrating within this business, is how to love and care for others sincerely and without judgment. And that is a very compelling place to be. So the aspect of choosing it or are you a victim of it goes out the window, because then it's like, if you have a need for love and it shows up, are you going to greet it? Are you going to greet the choice to love when love shows up in your life?
Yeah, so it's like it's more about the capacity to be right, that these things exist in the world, which we often can't control. We don't know who we're going to meet and what it is that they're going to do or say or be that sparks that something inside of us. And I get a bit of like cognitive dissonance here, because I genuinely believe that it's our thinking, it's our beliefs that create our emotional experience, our feelings. Like
really?
I do believe that to be true. Yeah. And I feel like I could prove it time and time again. And because the quality of our thinking significantly dictates how we perceive the thing in the world and what meaning we give it. There are things that exist in the world, let's call them circumstances, events, people, situations, things that have happened. And then the lived experience is that the circumstance exists, like you get a new piece of news, or you meet somebody, or somebody says something, or you receive a text message. And the lived experience is that you get that thing, or you see that thing, and then you feel. So that's what it seems like. But there's a filter that goes on in between those two things, and that's our perception. So it's our deeper set beliefs that have pre-existed, that have been reinforced over time through things that we've grown up and learned. And it's through the cognitive thinking that we have in the moment, and a combination of those two things. Sometimes we're able to take that moment, to that pause, if you like, and think about the situation. Like, how do I want to see this situation? Is this the way I see it? And if it's a deeper belief, it's often because we've had that thought go and go again and again. It's like a story we've continually told ourselves for years, decades even. And it sets as a deeper belief. So when our senses, if you like, perceive that particular thing, it immediately grabs it and says, this is the feeling, which is why this is where trauma experiences come from. It's imprinted, it's impregnated, if you like, in the body as a kind of an emotional memory, and it gets withdrawn straight away to the point where it feels like we've got no conscious awareness of what's going on. But it's because of how we're perceiving the situation. I'm thinking about the idea of choosing love. Like that's my relationship with love. I feel like I choose love because of what I make certain things, certain people, my children, you, like what I make that mean. But it's because there's lots of things. There's connection, there's authenticity, there's honesty, there's vulnerability, there's like all of these different elements that are aligned with who I want to be and what I feel aligned with. And because that's a subjective thing. It's my choice. Like, no one's told me that they're the values I have. They're the values that I am choosing.
Yeah.
And when you do things, like you, Chelsea, specifically, if you do things and say things to me that align with those things, then hell yeah, I choose to throw love your way. Like, and I choose to accept it. Like, it's my capacity to do those things. I don't feel like it's something external to me. That's my personal, and I know that's not how everybody sees it, but that's my personal lived experience. And the advantage of that means is I get to love whoever I want, regardless of what the fuck they think. Like, it's tough. I get to love you and there's nothing you can do about it.
I get to love you and there's nothing you can do about it. God, I love that. Oh my God. It's so true. I choose to love you and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's because it's because what I'm making it mean.
But that philosophy that you have, that the only thing that's really in control of your emotions is your thoughts. Don't you think that there are some people that you get in front of and there is intrinsic emotion that exists within you, and it doesn't have to do with what you think? Like, it is outside of you.
There's part of me that wants to believe that. There's part of me that absolutely understands what you're saying. And I feel like I've experienced that many times in my life. Why am I drawn to a particular color? Or why do I like a particular flower? Or why, or many, many things. Why do I fancy that particular girl? Or why do I feel drawn emotionally to that person? Or why, like, maybe for me, there is always a why. And I'm not saying I need to answer that. I'm not saying I have to go down that path and figure it all out. That's not necessary. But the underlying framework that I see the world through is that things happen. We interpret those things through our thinking, through our beliefs, and that ultimately creates how we feel. So if I have good quality thinking about you, then that creates much more positive and desirable, wanted emotions within me. And I do more of it. And when I feel those things, I show up in a particular way. So I'm more engaged. I'm more willing to do things. I'm wanting to share and be vulnerable, which ultimately just creates a better experience for me, which is amazing. Like, why wouldn't I do that? But if I had a poorer quality thinking of you, like maybe I was judging you in some way, or I was criticizing you, or I was trying to pick holes in you for whatever reason, just for the same thing that you did, just you existing, just you being there, showing up online, talking to me. And I had that lower quality level of thinking, which is a choice. Like, I choose what I think. I can't guarantee it. I can't always control which thought arises, but when they come past, I do get the choice of choosing which one I want to believe. So I choose those thoughts. If I was to choose those negative ones, then I would feel less. I wouldn't feel motivated. I'd feel a bit of disdain, or a bit of like, you're unworthy. And therefore I would disconnect and I would show up differently, and now my tone would change, and I would probably, reduce the possibility that I could form a connection. So how I think literally creates what I feel. And that then leads me to do what I do, how I show up in the world.
If you are the other woman in your relationship and you love this podcast, you would love the Other Women community. The Other Women community is a membership program designed to help other women just like you reclaim their relationship with themselves and heal from their affair. We provide a safe and supportive environment for you to open up and talk about your experiences. We give you the tools and resources you need to grow into an authentic, empowered individual. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, head on over to theotherwomanandthewife.com/community to learn more about the membership and all it has to offer. All right, let's jump back into the episode.
That's so interesting, because I see emotions more as kind of like a supernatural gift that we're all bestowed upon. And then it becomes our human responsibility to acknowledge and understand the emotion that is present and allow it to move us in ways that evolve our experience in life. So like anytime that I get a rise, I do this thing where I go back inside of my social media accounts and instead of reading other people's comments, I read my own. And I'm like, okay, what was this? Was this reactionary? Was this responsive? Like, what's actually going on inside of Chelsea that developed this particular reaction? And really trying to get the core of who I am and develop that wholeness that I so desperately want within me. And I get it by acknowledging that my emotions exist for me, not against me. And that I'm not in complete control of predicting what I'm going to think or feel in the next moment, in the next day, not getting too caught up in the predictability of life and getting more comfortable with embracing the uncertainty of life and trusting that I have the ability to navigate whatever comes at me. And so then it alleviates this whole being a victim of circumstance.
Okay,
but yeah, I think
it is fascinating.
So much more in control of your feelings, I think. And I'm like, man, I fucking love to feel. Like
I love to feel. And don't misinterpret I love feeling. And I absolutely live the emotional experience that I think most other people are capable of. And I would say I'm at the upper level, particularly, dare I say it, for guys. But I've explored it a lot. Like, I've really dug deep, and I'm not afraid of feeling. Like, I want to live the whole human experience, and that includes everything that's wanted, everything that's unwanted, whether you want to call that positive, negative, however you want to label it, doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. But like acknowledging that my emotions, my feelings are like a navigation system. It's like a notification, that says something, there's something here worth paying attention to. Maybe it's fear. Okay, maybe I need to check that, is this thing that I'm about to do, is this safe to do? And if I just let the fear take over, then the likelihood it might, activate my flight freeze response. And all of a sudden I find myself reacting, avoiding, resisting, running away, doing whatever. Or I can actually say, oh, hang on. No, it isn't a snake that's on the floor. My son's just left a bit of rope out. Mm-hmm. And I can revisit that situation very quickly and not go down that path. I can make that active choice.
Contextualize the experience that you're in, right? Ultimately, even with that snake on the floor example, the immediate perception is not always the most accurate perception.
Exactly that. So we can be if we're not careful, and this is often where people find themselves so stuck, is they don't make the transition from, that's not actually a snake on the floor. Mm-hmm. So the snake could be representative of, I can't decide whether to stay with my husband, where we've got this happy, secure family, or go to, which also doesn't feel very good. Like, I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel like I'm really completing my life's goal, or however I want to describe it. And instead, I've got this thing that feels so much better over here. Mm-hmm. All I can see is this blocker. And the blocker is the snake. Mm-hmm. But of course, if we look at it as that, then we're never going to move beyond it. We're going to stay in that place because it's always the block.
The blocker isn't even the snake, right? It's the idea that it could be a snake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's the perception. Of course, it's not the snake. The snake's just the thing. It's just a whatever. It doesn't matter. It's what we are making that snake mean.
I fucking love that you brought this analogy or metaphor. I don't know what it's actually called. I'm not very good at English. I just speak it. But the idea that the relationship that started as the affair is the snake, right? It's the evil temptation. Okay. It's the, your feelings guided you into this place, this negativity that is projected because marriage is so heavily idolized in a lot of societies, not just the American one.
Yep.
But that we would villainize one relationship over the other because of how it started. And going back to Kathleen's story, one of the things that I picked up on is that she had met this particular person when she was in her formative years. And how quickly someone would look at that story and be like, oh, this is just daddy issues. Oh, this is just, you didn't have a satisfying upbringing, and therefore now this relationship has come to be. What do you think about that whole trope where it's like affair relationships only exist because of trauma? or because you didn't have a healthy role model? Do you think that affair relationships can come to be not necessarily as a result of what went wrong, but maybe just because two people really truly value and love each other?
I mean, if I was to ask the question of what do I think are the primary causes of an affair, there is something unfulfilled. Something. Now, that can be within the relationship, it can be within the individual.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the exact cause of that sense of unfulfillment, I think that can vary. That could be from, like you said, it could be childhood experiences, it could be things, it could be role models. It could also be previous relationships. Again, experiences, the kind of things that are learned in some way, shape or form. There's no questioning or, in my opinion, even judging the natural desire to want to connect with somebody who makes you feel something that's worth feeling. I don't believe that in and of itself deserves the judgment that many people experience when they find themselves in this kind of situation, in the kind of situation that Kathleen's been in and many other people. The desire is normal. It's natural. It's part of being human. It's the longing. It's all of those things, and it can exist in its own right. And again, because we're often dealing, an affair is usually three people with a pivotal point in it, where it feels like that pivotal person who's engaged in relationships with two people, they have to make a choice. Like it's like a set of scales. It's like the husband is a weight on one side and the affair partner is a weight on the other side. And it's almost like these two things can't kind of go. So if one feels good, the other one has to feel bad and vice versa. And,
oh, yeah.
You know,
oh, man. I was just on a call with a client who was like, God, I started doing this thing where I started villainizing my wife. And really, this has nothing to do with her. And I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Like, it felt like this upward momentum of, oh, that's right. I don't need to point to other people to determine what it is that I'm experiencing in life.
Exactly. And I think that happens. I can think of that again from my own situation, my own experience, that the way that I would have been portrayed as the husband it would have been easier to justify an affair if you paint the home life, not even necessarily the husband, but the home life, just the experience, what exists on the other side of their life, of the individual's life. If you paint that in a worse light, it's easier to make the other bit feel better and or more, not even feel better, but it's just justified. It's like that balance. It's like one has to suffer. But then when you start to put your focus back on your husband or wife or your quote unquote primary partner, and you start to feel and think about, well, how will it impact them? What will they feel? What will their face look like when I tell them? Or if they were to discover? And then you start to raise their needs, and all of a sudden the affair partner starts to drop again. It's like, well, this is an unhealthy relationship. It's not safe. It's dangerous. Look at what society says. Obviously, it's wrong. Like that's so again, we've just got this constant seesawing. But like you just said, they're not actually directly related at all. They're two separate things. Now, whether they can coexist or not really depends on the dynamic within the relationship, and on the assumption that it's a monogamous relationship where the choice is to devote your partnership, whatever it is, with your primary partner, then of course, betrayal is still a betrayal. You know, we're not going to paint it up to be something that it isn't. But it's not a case of one has to suffer for the other one to improve.
It's not like that.
It's just not that straightforward. It's just not that straightforward.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting whenever people try to take an experience of life and put it into like an equation format. I'm like, you still live in 2D, huh? Welcome to 40.
I mean, when you're thinking about, in fact, you said 40. So as you were reading through that, I do have a question. It's regarding age. Like, men get hammered for midlife crisis. You know, get the young girlfriend, buy the new sports car, buy a motorbike, go out and just all of the things. Like all of a sudden, get the teeth done, get the hair done, get whatever. But there's something, and again, And particularly growing up, I only ever really heard that message. I'm thinking like, and obviously I'm in the UK, that message was only ever targeted at men. I don't really remember it being anything other than men.
I don't know.
And
From the female perspective, I remember it being like the negative viewpoint of there being disparity within ages. Oh, like immediately back to, oh, it's because she has daddy issues. Oh, like that piece. And also, oh, she just wants an older man because she's a gold digger. There's all these false narratives that kind of perpetuate throughout society. And the age thing, you know, it is a really interesting one because I think once you do mature, and this particular author, yeah, that's when she met this person, but it isn't necessarily when the relationship started to evolve. The relationship started to evolve when both people were within adulthood.
no, that's exactly what I mean. It was actually the 40 that was sticking out for me.
Yeah.
And again, because I work with lots of people, and it's usually somewhere between, if I was going to pick a category, a range, somewhere between 38 and 46. There you go. And there's my Luke Shillings statistics. That in that age range that I see a lot of is the women having what, and I don't want to call it a midlife crisis. That's not fair, and I don't mean that. But I don't actually mean that. But in terms of that, you could view it in that same context. And I'm just thinking, is that purely because by the time that women are at around that age, they have children that are at the very least in the teenage years, or at least they're getting older. They're becoming a little bit less dependent in some way, or maybe they're even empty nesters. And all of a sudden, the wife is sat there and she has spent and devoted her time and effort to both the marriage, to her role as a wife, to her parenting, to all of these things, that she's completely disconnected from who she is as an individual. She knows her hats. She knows all these different hats, but she doesn't know who she is as a whole. Like she doesn't know her values. She doesn't really know who she is. And then when she's looking at her husband or partner, she doesn't really know who they are either. There's this disconnect. And yeah, I'm just interested in like how you see that, Class.
I see it as and this isn't just like unique to females, but we get so wrapped up in the roles that we play in other people's lives that we have absolutely no connection to understanding what it is that we want to experience in our own life. And every single time I get on a call with somebody who has taken the role of martyr or made self-sacrifice their existence on the planet because it was the right thing to do or it was the good thing to do, has no understanding of what their life could be or even the capacity of the people around them to love them for who they really are. Like, I think that someone's love hinging on whether you're married to them or not isn't actual love. It's an expectation and an ultimatum. It's very conditional. And I think that true love is very interested in knowing who you really are and what you actually think and what you actually feel. And when I think about it for like women who are so wrapped up in the roles that they play, you know, some of the most profound things that my husband has done for me in the midst of adapting to motherhood and parenting and stuff is, I'll say that he's very conscientious. He can see things that I can't. And there are places where I get in my own way. And I will be stuck on this insanity wheel of, no, it has to be like this. It has to be like this. And then he even will come in and offer a different option. Like most recently, we did another move within the last 2 years. Don't even get me started. But when we were in the old place, I was so insistent on protecting his existence. And I couldn't even see my own. I couldn't even see how the prospect of moving would be beneficial for me, but he saw it all along. And so like, we really did have to sit down and I basically had to take a back seat. My ego did, actually. My ego needed to take a back seat and be like, maybe I'm wrong in this area and I'll let him drive this decision. we ended up doing it, and I was so grateful for his perception in the future decisions that we needed to make in order for our family to thrive, because it was ultimately my resistance to change that was keeping us stuck in a place where none of us really wanted to be. So, yeah.
One more question, just I think round this up in some sense. We've been talking about the two choices in a way, like what it's like to even love more than one person, what the sort of duality of love even looks like. If I was to say, I don't believe that you can truly love someone unless you truly love yourself, what does that?
I think that is true. I do think that is true. I think that you can fall in love, and that's where it becomes a slippery slope, when you don't know how to love yourself well, because then you just slip into situations where it feels like love, right? The falling in love aspect is not necessarily loving someone.
No, it's like the honeymoon. It's the lust period. It's amazing time to be alive.
I don't know though, because I don't think it's just like a one-time experience. I can say with certainty that I have fallen in love with myself at various points in my life.
Okay.
And I have fallen out of love with myself at various points in my life. And the same goes with people that I have entertained long-term relationships with. The idea that you can only fall in love once and you can only fall in love one time with a specific person, I think is flawed, because as I've bared witness to my own husband's life, there have been multiple times in our relationship where I've fallen back into love with him. And I do experience that sensation of, you're the most miraculous person on this earth. I'm so impressed by you. I marvel at him. And even this morning, he just got a promotion. And I'm like, of course you did. And a couple of nights prior, I had a dream that he lost his job. And it's really interesting how, coming back to you saying that emotions are completely dependent on what we think, yes, I agree to a point. But then there's also the stuff that exists within us that isn't provoked by us entirely. It just exists. And it's that compass that you talked about.
Okay, but you spoke about the choices that you couldn't see. Like you felt you were stuck in a situation, in a cycle, in terms of prior to the move. And he was able to offer a route, a path, be able to show you something that you couldn't see in that moment. And then you took that path. You believed in him, you trusted yourself enough to trust him, and you took that journey. And then the outcome has aligned, maybe surprisingly in some way, maybe not exactly as you planned, but it's created an outcome that you're happy with, you're satisfied, and you're fulfilled with. Now, it's not uncommon or unusual for you to then directly associate what you currently have now with the decisions that were made back then. But in that one choice, that one path that was made, you ignored probably 10 million other possible paths. So it's normal for us to make sense of the situation. But again, it is because we're making sense of the situation. It's the story that we tell ourselves. And if we're going to tell ourselves a story, make it a good one. Because if we're going to live in a narrative, then just make it a good one. And that's okay. So, and I don't believe we're actually saying, and this is one of the things I've always loved about the connection that you and I have, is that I think we often say the same thing. It's like we're just looking at it from very different sides.
It's not even looking at it from different sides. I think that you and I use different languages.
That's probably a better way of putting it.
I think it's the language it's our ability to use our different verbiage and language that allows us to connect with different people. There are certain people who listen to this podcast and they're like, oh, I fucking love the way Chelsea speaks. I hate the way Luke talks. Then there's other people who are like, oh my God, I'm so glad she finally brought Luke on, because I can't stand to hear her talk about her feelings all the time. And I think that's why we all have a voice, because ultimately it is that the visual, the audible, our senses that connect us with the experience that we're having. Like we're having a shitty meal. it's usually not just because of the food.
No.
It's everything else that's there
Of course
too.
it's everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we always find the things that we seek as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I remember, it's so funny that you say that, because I remember when we had something go awry in the community and someone had ended up in there with malicious intent. And I had said to a friend, I was like, but I get it. They just want to understand. And this person looks at me and laughs and goes, what are you talking about? They're looking to validate why they're angry. They don't want to understand. If they wanted to understand, they would talk to somebody. But no, this person just wants to validate why they're angry. And so, if we're looking for evidence of why this particular emotion exists, we're actually only perpetuating the emotion.
Just feeding it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I thought that it might be interesting to discuss the part where she says love is hard. I just feel like, so she talks about how she loves the 3 little boys and she loves their father, but I am not in love with him. He is kind and not abusive, an amazing dad. Love is hard. And when I read that, I was thinking about the fact that I feel like we hear that all the time. I love them, but I'm not in love with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it? Is it the marriage component? What is the thing that makes us fight so hard against actually telling that spouse, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore and I don't know what to do? Why is that?
Fear of disappointment.
Fear of disappointment.
Yeah.
So it's like love, is it hard, or is it just hard when you're shying away from your own intuition?
I think it's life where you play a lot of roles to other people is hard. And when you consider the role you play in somebody else's life more important than the experience you're having in your own life, you start to make your own life hard. I don't think that love is hard or easy or any of these things that we claim it to be. When I think of acts of love, it is solely focused on the person that you are trying to demonstrate love to. And it's not focused on you at all. Like it is that removal of expectation of others. Right?
I think a lot of it does get tied up in what you just, is that when you're trying to fulfill what you think loving someone even means, like it is this thing that you somehow have to take out of you and put into the other person. You have to prove it. You have to demonstrate it. And it's like, take what we were saying earlier. Like I said things that verbalizes my love towards you as a friend and as a co-host and as all of the roles that exist. But I don't, and I said that, but that was more for demonstrative purposes. I don't need to say anything because the feeling of love that I have for anybody else in my life is all mine. Like I feel it. Nobody else feels it. No one. And I can't take what I feel out of me and put it into you so you know what I'm feeling. I can say the words and you can make that mean whatever you want. But if a stranger came up onto the street, or particularly if it was someone who was a bit shady looking and they started to tell you how much they loved you, you'd probably be like, give me a little bit of space, Creed. Like maybe you wouldn't. Example. Maybe you wouldn't actually.
No, actually, dude, you bring up a perfect example because I was approached on the street by somebody who watches my content and they were a super fan. And I loved that moment so much. But what happened after that moment was so revealing to me because I didn't understand the level of exposure that this particular brand has. I had no understanding of it at all. And then when that real life encounter happened, the next day, I went looking for protection. I went looking for somebody who could protect me from the people who might approach me on the street that hate me. Right? It immediately sent me into this spiral of, oh my God, people recognize me. And I know that there's a level of hatred in my comment section. Like I was so grateful that the person that encountered me was somebody who was a fan and gave me a super big hug. And I was like, can I take a photo with you? That's how I responded to that moment. But then the after effects of that moment are also so interesting to me, because it's like I immediately went into, oh my God, all of a sudden I'm aware that strangers know me in this certain way and I need to protect myself from it. Even though the actual experience that I had was love. This man came up to me and gave me a big old hug and was like, you really are changing people's lives here, and I don't think you know it. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, I didn't even know you were going to come up to me type thing. So yeah, if someone comes up to me on the street and does a demonstration of love, there is this thing that kind of awakens within you where the multitude of your emotion all of a sudden becomes present.
Yes, but that's because of the context. I'm talking about somebody who comes up to you who doesn't have any of that reasoning other than they've just come up to you as out of the blue for what seems like no reason. Obviously, it's fabricated as an idea, but you're loving, not just in that example you share there, that the feelings that you have are coming not just from that individual, it's what that individual is talking about. It's the realization of the connection. It's the reach that you have. It's the, wow, this is really working. It's I'm helping people and this is the reward I get. And like the whole narrative that goes on around that. And it's like that, of course, in reality. And yeah, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you feel that? But
yeah,
you have a level of love for your husband. And you could list off reasons if you wanted to as to why that is. But if he was objectively lovable, then everybody would feel exactly the same way about him. In the same way that I can list off reasons to why you could be considered lovable, and he would be able to as well. And I'm sure many other people could too.
Yeah.
But as you rightly said, there are people that are trying to validate their experience by getting angry in the comment sections and trying to verbalize that to try and justify their own behavior in some way, rather than actually just peeling back just one teeny little layer so that they could actually see what's going on here and actually see what it is that you and I and so many other people here are actually trying to do. And that's just to connect and to feel and to experience and to own and take some responsibility and not be afraid of it and to live life authentically.
Yeah, I completely agree. But a stranger coming up to me and doing an act of love, I would receive it. Is that bad?
That's okay.
Look at me trying to judge myself.
It's probably not the best example. I'll try to call it something a bit better.
So Kathleen, up until this point, you understood that your affair helped you feel alive again after feeling dead inside for so many years. I think what I would love to impart on you is that feeling of being alive wasn't necessarily because of him. It was because of the experience that you had with him, and that it wasn't just unique to this other person. That was a shared experience, and you are very much welcome to feel alive in your own life on a regular basis without the need to deceive others or yourself about the experience that you want. Luke, what would you say to Kathleen?
Yeah, something not hugely dissimilar. That the affair and him and every part of that is, consider it a representation as a picture of an ideal. And sometimes we can become so attached to a specific detail and this applies to all situations, a specific detail. And then we make everything align towards that and justify it, prove it, all the things. And we're not denying the emotional experience. We've spoken a lot about love in this episode, and we're not denying the emotional lived experience of Kathleen as an individual in this situation, like not at all. But certainly from where I stand, it's far more about what that experience represents. And it's hard to let go of. And detaching the individual, in this case, Martin, from that experience is something that with time can help you make sense of. And this is not even a direct thing that has to be done, in contrast to the marriage and the relationship and your kids. Like we spoke about, these are still two separate things. One is not dependent on the other. So maybe really drawing attention to the fact that this is two separate things rather than one thing that's just tottering.
I love that you brought this up though, and I'm sorry, I know we're supposed to be at the end. I'm just going to say this really fast. When you're going about making choices in your personal life and you're in the midst of an affair, it's never about what the choice results in the future. The choices that you should be making are more surrounded around what types of habits is it that I want to build, and recognizing which habits exist within your current reality that don't serve you well. This idea that, oh, I'm lying, but I'm an honest person. You've developed a habit of lying. So let's turn that habit into the habit of being honest. And so converting those habits into things that are beneficial towards you will really start to illuminate the world around you and what it is that you need to do next to feel alive in your life, apart from romantic relationships or primary partnerships.
I think a quick finish on habits specifically in that context is that we are extremely good at getting better at the things that we keep doing. If we repeat the same thing over, we get better at it. And that includes sitting on the sofa and watching Netflix. If you do that day after day, you get damn good at it.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you. So, and the same is true here, as Chelsea talks about those habits that aren't helping you in this current situation. You keep doing that line of habit, and it will always end up with what you've got right now, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've made it this far, you're likely someone who is invested in the journey of being the other woman. We understand that this can be a difficult and complex experience, which is why we offer guided coaching to help you heal and move forward. We encourage you to explore the links in the episode description or visit theotherwomanandthewife.com/coaching to learn more about our exclusive coaching program and apply today. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.